In 1989, I lived in Daytona Beach, Florida. My dad was a deacon at church, and Mom sang in the choir, and I was their bouncing little baby girl. I guess you could say that we were a good Christian family, always went out of our way to help others. Because of that, my father may very well have lost his life had I not been with him. One day, while traveling from my grandparents' house in Ormond Beach over the Granada Bridge, we were stopped as the bridge was being lowered. My father looks over and sees a woman hitchhiking, so he offers her a ride. At first, she's pretty gung-ho about it, but then she sees me in the back seat and her whole demeanor changes. She refuses, but my dad insisted, so she gets in. We take her over to a bar in downtown, and she thanks my father. He recalls her being a bit strange, really twitchy and nervous. She had nothing but nice things to say about me though, going on about what a pretty baby I was. She told him as she got out of the car that he was lucky to have me with him, and that he should thank God for me. Fast forward some time, and my dad and Mom are watching the news. Suddenly, Dad starts wigging out. "I picked her up and took her to a bar," he screams at the TV. There on the news was a sketch drawing of the same woman he picked up on the bridge. The anchorman said that her name was Eileen Warnos, and she was wanted for murder. To this day, my father swears that had I not been in the car, he may very well have been killed. Before the story, just a little background information. I'm a 15-year-old guy living in northern Florida with my mom and my dog. We live in a 2-story apartment located in a small apartment complex that just happens to be right next to an old cemetery. Just to be clear, I get out of school at 3 o'clock, and my mom doesn't get off work until 5, so it's typical of her to take a late lunch and pick me up, then go back to work for another hour and a half and get home around 5:30. Anyways, on with the story. So it was around 3 months after we moved into our condo when this occurred. It was a typical Friday for me, go to school, get home at 3:15, and be home alone until my mom got there. On this particular day, my mom decided to stay late and wouldn't get home until 8 o'clock. I, like most other teenagers, didn't mind being home alone for extended periods of time, simply because I got to play video games without any interruption. It's around 6:15. My dog was whining, so I decided to take him for a walk. As I walked downstairs, I heard what sounded like someone breathing outside my front door. Not just light breathing. I mean, it sounded like someone had finished running a marathon or something. I turned to investigate, and to my horror, I saw a tall, shirtless man standing with his face pressed directly against the glass. This man had to be at least 6'7" in his mid-50s and had a lumberjack-style beard with very large glasses. My kitchen is right next to my front door, so I grabbed the biggest knife I could and told him to fuck off. He seemed emotionless and simply walked away. I wish the story ended there, but of course, it didn't. It was now around 7:30, so it was getting dark, and there was no signs of the creepy man, so I decided it was safe to proceed outside. So me and my dog walked our usual path, which led us directly past the cemetery. This time, it was different. I had this eerie feeling that I wasn't alone. I could feel someone watching me. My dog's ears perked up and eventually stopped walking altogether. He began to stare towards the cemetery and started barking uncontrollably. I started looking to see what he was barking at, and to my absolute shock, I saw the same bearded guy from before. He looked different though, almost like he was leaning on something, but I couldn't quite see what it was. As I leaned in to take a closer look, I realized that it was a shovel, and he had a red bag on the ground next to him with what looked like a human foot sticking out of the bottom of it. Was this creep digging a fucking grave? Was this creep digging a fucking grave? I asked myself. What happened next still sends chills down my spine. He gave me the creepiest smile I've ever seen. Then he simply picked up his shovel and once again began digging as if he never saw me. Safe to say, me and my dog got the hell out of there. When I got back home, my mom was already there, and I told her what happened. She called the cops, and I guess they went to the cemetery to investigate, but found nothing. We moved out of that place a few months later. 6 months have now passed, and I still haven't heard anything from the police. I just hope he's either dead or in jail somewhere. So sick fuck in the cemetery, let's never meet again. This is a story my uncle told me before he died. Unfortunately, I'm unable to provide proof of this occurrence, but I don't think he would lie about something like this. I'm going to write this story from his perspective as it was told to me. It was the mid-1980s in Arkansas. My girlfriend at the time dragged me to a wedding. She was close friends with the bride. The wedding took place on a ranch. I have to say, it was a pretty nice setup, surrounded on all sides by a thick forest that stretched on for miles. We were literally in the middle of nowhere. It took us 3 hours just to reach the place from where I lived, but the journey was worth it, even though I didn't know a whole lot of people there. I still had a great time. I even danced. I never dance. There was an open bar, so you can imagine that things got pretty wild as the night progressed. After about an hour of me reenacting Saturday Night Fever on the dance floor, I had to sit down because my feet were starting to hurt. Before I go on, let me explain the layout of this ranch. The ranch and the outdoor dance floor was located in a clearing that was surrounded on all sides by trees. There was a tree line about 35 to 40 yards away from where I was, and there was a lot of bright lights around the dance floor. But beyond that, it was completely dark. As I was sitting there rubbing my sore feet, I could see something taking place in the distance just outside the tree line. I couldn't see too clearly because of the lighting, but what I saw kind of amused me. I saw a dark figure dragging someone into the tree line. Again, it was hard to see, but I thought the person that was being dragged was wearing one of the bright yellow bridesmaid dresses. I chuckled when I saw that. I remembered thinking, looks like someone drank too much. I feel the need to point out that I too was a little intoxicated, otherwise I may have said something about someone being dragged away from the party into a dark forest. Maybe I thought the two were gonna get freaky in the woods or something. A few hours later, we left the wedding celebrations, but what I found out 2 days later made my stomach drop. Apparently, one of the bridesmaids went missing after the wedding. I told the police what I remembered seeing that night. The very next day, they found the body of the missing bridesmaid in the woods. She had been dismembered, and some of her limbs were found scattered throughout the forest. From what I hear, they didn't even recover all of her body parts. The person responsible was never found. I felt guilty for many years after this because I can't help but to think I could have saved her life if I said something. She wasn't even 20 years old yet. She had her whole life ahead of her, but she ended up in pieces.